And we are continuing to track that active weather. Hurricane Ida, Category 1 hurricane just off the coast of Cuba, and it's making its way into New Orleans and could potentially make landfall by tomorrow evening. Of course, you will feel that the outer arms by this evening, Saturday, and you can see upwards of 300 to 400 millimeters of that rainfall. Again, talking about those levee systems and really flooding and strong winds associated with this hurricane. Now, let's take a closer look at the weather events happening in Canada. We do have this system forming, making some active weather for northwestern, northeastern Ontario. Of course, southern Ontario, part of this risk, but really eyes set on northwestern Ontario for some of that strong wind, heavy rainfall, and large hail. And by Sunday, really that risk widespread throughout. Again, a greater area for that risk for storms for Sunday. A ridge of high pressure really protecting the Atlantic. Beautiful temperatures throughout. 22 degrees in Halifax. For this time of year, it should be right around there at 21 degrees. And then 23 by Sunday. In through the west, a ridge of high pressure protecting BC and parts of Alberta. But there is a system that has its eyes set on the Interlake region. And serene, tranquil images coming to us. Hi there, I'm Marta Czurylowicz here for the Weather Network. Thanks for joining us today. Let's talk about the systems across the country. In the east, we really have a ridge of high pressure protecting much of the east before the system swipes on through. And in the west, well, it is quite dry, but the prairies is where it remains active for the day. Taking a look at the precipitation forecast for Ontario and Quebec, you can see that low really slicing on through, making its way Sunday into Monday. But Saturday evening is where northern parts of Ontario could see some of that potential severe weather. The rainfall accumulation through Sunday, again, really focusing its targets on northeastern and northwestern Ontario through Saturday. Sunday, there could be some of those pop-up storms for southern Ontario. And as I mentioned, this ridge of high pressure is really protecting the south. See all that active weather in through northwestern, northeastern Ontario. And that ridge of high pressure is also protecting the Atlantic, but it's also making it really hot and humid in southern Ontario, feeling like 35 in Toronto. Again, an image of that ridge of high pressure really situated over the Atlantic, protecting for the weekend, which is going to be beautiful. Check out these temperatures across the board this afternoon. 21 in Truro, which is right around seasonal for this time of year. And by Sunday, again, a really nice weekend. As I mentioned, in juxtaposition, the west really dry for southern parts of BC, the lower mainland quite dry, but beautiful temperature. It is now bubbling up and gaining momentum, gaining speed, and you can see that there are definitely hurricane warnings, tropical storm warnings, hurricane watches and tropical storm watches in place for areas inclusive of New Orleans and parts of Louisiana and Alabama as well. So right now, Hurricane 1 category. By the time that it makes landfall in the States, which is expected by tomorrow, by Sunday evening, you can see it's just building up that speed, and it could potentially even become a hurricane category 4 by the time that it makes landfall. Now let's take a look at some of that active weather from coast to coast. I'm Marta Czurylowicz. Thank you for joining me this weekend. Looking at Saturday, really across the country, it's going to be dry for the most part for the east. However, in through northern parts of Ontario, northeastern, northwestern Ontario, that system is really going to be bringing some of that active weather through the overnight, Saturday into Sunday. Really, some of those localized pockets of rainfall through southern Ontario, but that's really focusing on Sunday. We do have this ridge of high pressure that's really protecting southern Ontario and keeping that system well to the northwest and northeast, bringing that severe weather for them. Now, taking a look at the temperature for southern Ontario, lots of that moisture really being funneled up, bringing that humidity to 35. So it feels like hot, humid, soupy weather, and you could see by Sunday there is the chance for some of those showers through Toronto, but the rest of the week really looking beautiful. High pressure situated over the Atlantic, really pushing out any of those storms. Beautiful weekend for the Atlantic, right around seasonal for this time of year. Should be around 21, and that's exactly where it is. You can see in Halifax, 22 degrees. The 7-day forecast looking very nice. nice. That system that's in through Ontario making its way to the Atlantic by the start of the week on Monday. Now, in juxtaposition in the west, dry for the lower mainland. Northern parts of BC could see some of that moisture, some of that rain. However, dry, as I mentioned, for areas like Vancouver, 21 in through the interior, 26 in through Kelowna. Very nice conditions. And by Sunday, you know, those temperatures are really holding up as well. And for the prairies, there is some active weather in through Manitoba and the Interlake region. But here are some of your videos and pictures. Through what looks to be a cornfield, very limited visibility, and there is active weather in the forecast. Of course, weather happens daily. I'm Marta Czurylowicz. Thanks for joining us here on the Weather Network. Let's talk about some of these pockets of green and yellow, which of course mean some thunderstorms are brewing. When we're talking about the upper level pattern, we do have some high pressure really blocking much of the east from any of the active weather. However, northwestern and northeastern Ontario is where we could see some of that active weather through the weekend, and then really potentially for southern Ontario, but this ridge of high pressure is really blocking out anything that could be a washout of a day for southern Ontario. However, as I mentioned, northwestern, northeastern Ontario through the weekend could see some of the active weather. Toronto 7-day forecast, 29 degrees on Sunday with that rain icon possible. Ridge of high pressure protecting the Atlantic, making it a beautiful weekend. And taking a look at Halifax, the 7-day forecast really holding out until the start of the week. So Monday looks to be that day of a little bit of unsettled conditions. For the west, dry through the lower mainland, really beautiful conditions throughout. 21 degrees in Vancouver, 26 in Kelowna, in through the interior, so nice and right around seasonal for Vancouver, which is 21 degrees. Heading into the prairies, really that pressure protecting Alberta, but Saskatchewan and Manitoba through the Interlake region, that's where you could see that active weather. Thanks for joining us here on the Weather Network. I'm Marta Czurylowicz, and as we were talking about, there is active weather for parts of the country, and it has its eyes set on northwestern and northeastern Ontario. You can see that low really forming itself and situated over northern parts of Ontario, bringing some of that unsettled weather throughout. There is going to be some heat and humidity through southern parts of Ontario as we head into that warm sector in between the warm front and the cold front there, really making potential for some of that active weather by the end of this weekend and then making its way into Atlantic Canada. But let's take a look at some of those risks associated with the thunderstorms. Again, really overnight Saturday night into Sunday, and the potential is there for some strong wind gusts, heavy rainfall, and large hail for southern Ontario. But the risk really amplifies through the weekend, through Sunday, again for that strong wind, heavy rainfall, and large hail in through the warm sector as that system passes on through and makes its way into Atlantic Canada. But the weekend is going to be beautiful for the Maritimes and for Newfoundland. As you can see, right around seasonal for this time of year, 22 degrees in Halifax. And by Sunday, 23, very nice and clear as that ridge of high pressure really protects the east. Now, in through the west, there is this ridge of high pressure situated just over BC and Alberta, protecting much of the southern parts of the west. So the lower mainland remaining fairly dry. Conditions, 21 degrees in Vancouver, 26 in Kelowna, and the next 7 days looks fairly nice as well, with a chance of some of those showers on Monday, but not a great chance, just 40%. It's really the Interlake region in Manitoba that could see much of that active weather throughout, and just some parts of southern Saskatchewan. But right now, it's time for my favorite segment, Share Your Weather.